Hello and welcome back to this is day 14 of our Holy Land trip. This is our last day, and we began at the Oasis by Engedi by the Dead Sea. And we want to start out today by letting you hear a little bit about the professor who's been with us all along, Dr. Monty Luker, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Dr. Luker, we'd like to know a little bit about your background. You've done a wonderful job with our tour group, and we'd like to know a little bit about your background and your history of here in Israel.
I'm Dr. Monty Luker. I'm a Lutheran pastor, served the parish on Long Island, New York, and was professor of Old Testament at California Lutheran College for 6 years before coming to Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary in 1988. And I've been professor of Hebrew Scriptures there at Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary in Columbia, South Carolina, since 1988. I'm also teaching associate in the Graduate Department of Religion at the University of South Carolina, and I'm adjunct professor of Bible for the Jerusalem Center for Biblical Studies, located in Jerusalem. I have been teaching these tours probably for about 20 years. I've been coming to Israel for about 30 years, which is kind of scary. Made my first trip as a graduate student in 1981. And I have enjoyed this group from Mount Horeb Lutheran Church in Chapin, South Carolina. They have just been a delight. We have a 2-week tour that even took us down close to the Sinai Desert and all the way up to the Golan Heights in the north.
We thank you very much, and we really appreciate your expertise, and we look forward to trips in the future, and we look forward to the final part of this trip. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
We appreciated so much the leadership and the teaching of Dr. Monty Luker. He really made this trip. This spring area is one of the several springs that feed the Oasis here at Engedi. Next, we left and drove along the road along the side of the sea, the Dead Sea, which was to our right. Dead Sea, again, is 1,350 feet below sea level. It's about 42 miles long by about 11 miles wide, a little bit similar to Lake Murray back home. After we left here, the next stop for us was Qumran. This is a community that dates back as far as the 8th century BC, where it was populated by Jewish sect. But this is where, back in the 40s and 50s, they discovered the ancient scrolls that lead back to our biblical writings. Here are some of the fragments that were found. And a Bedouin shepherd boy threw a rock into one of these caves, and he heard the shattering of pottery, and it turns out they found these Dead Sea Scrolls that we use today. Great place to see the ruins there. From there, we left and headed north again to Jericho, the oldest city in the world. We found some ruins that dated back to 10,000 years ago. Here's one of the walls from that particular city. And of course, you can't go to this area without finding a little bit of fun on the camels. And we have some pictures here of us enjoying some camel rides. You know, the Hebrew word for camel means to carry. They live about 40 to 50 years, and they're indigenous to this part of the world. They've been domesticated for about 4,000 years, and they certainly are around, and you can see them every day. We had fun as we enjoyed learning a little bit about camels and what they even ride like. Not too smooth, but we had a great time on them. After we left this area, we got back in our bus and we headed a little bit further north to Emmaus. This is a Crusader church built a little bit around 1100 AD, where this spot was identified by the Crusaders as the village of Emmaus, and so they built this church here. We had an opportunity to hear the story about the disciples heading to Emmaus and Jesus visiting with them and opening their minds and stirring their hearts with the scriptures, and then they realized what had happened. And we hope that that's what happens on this trip, that we've had our eyes open, our hearts stirred by this wonderful journey to the Holy Land. Our next stop was up to Jaffa on the Mediterranean Sea as we headed to Tel Aviv, and we had a celebratory dinner to celebrate our time together, and had a great time thinking about all the things that we've learned, the sights that we've seen, and had another final meal together before we headed off to the Tel Aviv airport. We want to thank you for joining us for these 2 weeks of our trip to Mount Horeb, to the Holy Land, and we hope that it has inspired you as we know it has us. Thanks again, and God's peace in your faith journey.